John Gronski. I'm here in Wiesbaden, Germany, and I'm happy to say that I'm with a very good friend and outstanding leader. His name is Joseph Byrne, and he is the Readiness and Resiliency Director at USARAF, which is U.S. Army Europe and Africa Command. So really glad to be here. And Joseph, let me put the camera on you here. Joseph, I just wanted to ask you a few questions about resiliency, because we were having a conversation yesterday and we both feel very strongly about resiliency, about the need for leaders, and whether you're in a formal leadership position or not, just the need for people to develop their resiliency. And I just want to get your thoughts on how could people become more resilient? And let me ask you this first. Do you think resiliency happens on its own, or do you think people have to train to become a more resilient person? What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, John. I appreciate it. And thanks for coming out here to Wiesbaden and coming back and joining us. It's great to see an old friend. Resiliency, obviously you stated up front, we're both very passionate about this topic, and it's kind of what I do. Resiliency, I think it is something that can be learned, right? I definitely believe in that. Part of being the R2 chief in U.S. Army Europe and Africa is that's part of my mission, right? So resiliency obviously is something that a lot of people take for granted. However, there's a lot of opportunity there, especially when you're in a environment where you have very different age groups and different levels of maturity to kind of look at, see where we are with resiliency, and potentially adapt that to become a leader who really does train or help people develop resiliency. So one of the things that I say is, resiliency, a lot of people will kind of can pigeonhole it, like, oh, I'm physically resilient because I'm working out, or I'm mentally resilient. But I think it's a total package, right? How do we be holistically resilient? How do we develop this mindset of, like, life has challenges, right? So if we prepare ourselves and we have a little foresight and we look at there's potential challenges ahead, maybe I can prepare myself. I think in the military sense, we always look at if we're going to go to deploy or go to do a mission, we do our pre-combat checks, pre-combat inspections. I think the same can hold true with developing resiliency throughout your lifetime, right? Adversity is going to come. We know life has challenges. So how do we think a little ahead and say, you know what, when you're faced with a challenge, do I have those decision-making tools in my toolkit to, deal with that adversity? And so one thing that I think is effective as a leader is vignettes, talking about, hey, here's an experience, talk through, and maybe an experience you had where resilient, and then have that discussion with your, with your peers or your subordinates or whoever it is, and talk them through, what would you do in this issue? How would you handle this situation? So that as they move through life and these different challenges approach, they at least have a point of reference they can draw from. All situations aren't the same. However, there's some learning points that can be taken from it, and at least you're preparing for it, versus, if you're walking through life and like, hey, listen, it's all going to be roses and sunshine, you're hit with adversity, that can really take a strong toll on you. And not to belabor it, but I think it's a holistic approach. So I think being, physically, making sure your body is prepared for the challenges that are ahead, mentally, making sure you're in the right mind space, that you have the ability to cope with things, that you have a support team, that you have other people you can count on. Spiritually, where do you really draw your purpose and meaning from, and where are those anchors at in your life? And then socially, developing a social network. I think the more isolated we are, and this is proven, the more we isolate ourselves, the greater chance for us to be kind of struggle more. So being connected, as I think we've all heard, having this connection and being connected to community and others is really important, and it's helpful for the others too.
Yeah, Joseph, that's some great points you brought up. I really like the point you brought up about the responsibility leaders have to train their team to become more resilient. And you mentioned one way to do that is by using the vignettes and talking through possible challenges and being prepared for those challenges in the future. I think that's a great technique. Anything just to summarize on your thoughts there, or anything else you want to mention before we end our conversation
No,
here.
I think the one thing I would add to this is like it's always fun to talk about, theoretical, or like this is what you should do. But then how do we operationalize that, right?
Yeah.
How do what I just said, how do we actually put that into practice,
Yeah.
right? So I think being practical about it is, as a leader, designing these moments into your day, designing or into the workspace, right? So figuring out when is it, for a military leader, is it at physical training where, you're doing cool down? Is there an opportunity to, share a story where you overcame adversity and do it there? Or if you're a civilian and you're in the workplace, is there a time where you have a, group meeting or a huddle, and then, you say, well, we're going to take this first 10 minutes and we're going to talk about X, Y, or Z, and have others share. Recently, I was in a meeting like that, and I was very surprised and amazed to see how much people are willing to share once the leader shares. Once you open yourself up, it's it's kind of a trust exercise. If you can show a little bit of vulnerability, I think people tend to really, that builds trust, and people will really gravitate to that.
I'm glad you mentioned vulnerability, because I don't think vulnerability is talked about enough when we talk about leadership and good leadership characteristics. And you mentioned, leaders opening up and sharing first in order to get others to share. And I'm a big believer that one of the key aspects of vulnerability is leaders allowing themselves to be vulnerable, where they could share stories about the times they've made mistakes or the times they failed and how they were able to overcome that. They try to inspire those that they lead.
100%. Again, I'm not the quote guy, but I know that it's been said, it takes how many failures, hundreds of failures, to get to that success. So, if we can't be afraid to fail, and as leaders, I think it's important to show that, like, that's part of the journey.
Yeah. Hey, Joseph, I'll tell you, this was awesome. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. You are the Readiness and Resiliency Director here at U.S. Army Europe and Africa Command, so they're in good hands with you taking on that responsibility. So again, thanks for your thoughts, and thanks for everything you do for our country.
No, thank you, John. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'm very fortunate. It's not lost on me that I have the opportunities, and I've been given the opportunities I have in to help and to be part of soldiers and families' lives.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, thanks again. And one thing, Joseph, I always like to close with this. Remember, iron sharpens iron.
Most definitely. Thanks.